Are we ready? Welcome. Let us rise in body or spirit and sing our opening hymn, number 389 in your gray hymnal. You should all have hymnals today. In your gray hymnal, it's called Gathered Here. To Remember by Ade Ama Kraba. Spirit of life, we have come here today to remember what some are intent on making us forget. To remember a man who fought to end segregation. To remember a man who marched to counter prejudice and oppression. To remember a man who was filled with peace and hope. To remember a man with promise and a dream. To remember a man with a voice that rang out for justice and freedom. All these things we remember and honor in the legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and a life well lived in service to all. May it be so. Welcome to this Unitarian Universalist sanctuary where you can be all of who you are and where the story of who you are and what you dream to achieve will be welcomed and affirmed. Good morning on this very rainy Sunday. My name is Heather Norby. I am the Spiritual Life Director for this congregation, and I use the pronouns she and her. In order to build this community, we need love and connection, and that will lead to spiritual and ethical transformation. This is your community, and so we ask that you please be an active part of it by joining us in the following activities and events. Well, first of all, singing. We do lots of singing here, and you'll notice that we did hand out the gray and the teal hymnals today, and so I ask that, you use them if the words aren't up there or if something in tech goes a little bit awry. We are still troubleshooting and working on those problems, but also using the hymnals is like holding a piece of history in your hands, right? Because the gray hymnal has been a UU hymnal since the 80s, I think. And the teal hymnal in the early 2000s, and there's a lot of information in there about who we are as Unitarian Universalists. Plus, you can look at the notes and you know when the music is going up and down, if you don't read music. Did you get your tickets yet for Twisted Pine, which is this Friday, yes? Alrighty, Twisted Pine, this Friday here in the sanctuary at 7 p.m. This is a fundraiser for UUCL because of the generous work of Crystal and her husband, Tom. Thank you. We are looking forward to it. They are a progressive bluegrass band that NPR dubbed a band to watch, so come on out and watch them. We have a brick fundraiser going on. There are some forms to fill out if you haven't been online to fill one out already. The link is in the newsletter, but there are also paper forms on that stand there where the Joys and Sorrows book is when you first come in, and you can buy a brick. with your name on it, and it will go out on our sidewalk there, therefore leaving a part of your legacy of love here at UUCL. I would like to say thank you to everybody who helped prepare for and who marched in the MLK parade yesterday. Oh, we have pictures. So I believe Dorothy and I counted 19 Unitarian Universalists. And of course, we marched with the Interfaith Coalition of Polk County. Oh, there I am, yes, with Tim, holding our big banner. And you can see that all of the churches that are in the Interfaith Coalition are listed on there. And so we had Tim from Beacon Hill Fellowship march with us, and we had Reverend Beth from College Heights Methodist and a few of her congregants march with us. Oh, and Tim had a couple of his folks march with us. I think that was it, but everybody else was there in spirit, I am sure. So it was a great time, and yes, 19 of us, and I think a lot of those 19 of us are here today, just trying to keep our eyes open, and so please bear with us. Thank you. Next week, we will have a very special Lord of the Rings theme service about how this beloved fantasy story teaches us the importance of our interconnectedness. Grace Gale will be presenting the service, and I'm very happy to be here supporting her and doing that. Please see Helen if you would like to join the book club for Authentic Selves, celebrating trans and non-binary people and their families. I think she said she was going to limit the group to 6, and there's a couple more spots. And if she gets enough people who are interested, she will do a second group. So please let Helen in the office know if you're interested. Her email is contact@uuclakeland.org. And of course, please check, oh wait, hold on. Town hall today. There's a town hall today. After the service, of course, we'll go have some snacks first, and then we'll come back in here about 12:30, and we will participate in a town hall in which we will continue to work on our vision statement. And as you know, a vision statement takes the input of all of us and all of our visions in order to make the big vision. And I know Jen was here earlier putting up the posters that have the ideas on it from our last town hall, and so we will start from there and keep moving forward. Thank you. So yes, please check the back of your order of service and our e-newsletter, which is published on Mondays, for more information. Now, let us create our sacred space by lighting our chalice. As Unitarian Universalists, we center ourselves in love and aspire to live by 6 shared values. As you see there. Justice is the value we bring into the light today. As I read the words that support our call to justice, we can hear the echoes of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. calling us evermore to keep bending the moral arc of the universe and to never stop writing the story of justice. Crystal, would you please do us the honor of lighting our chalice? And I will read the words for justice as it is written in our Article 2. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. We support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make decisions. May it be so. Please rise and body your spirit now, and let us sing hymn number 123, Spirit of Life.
All the
like to invite our children and anyone young at heart to join us at the front for our message for all ages. Here he comes, he's ready. Hi. Excited for story? Oh, good. Hi, come on up, wherever you're comfortable, yeah. Oh, yeah, she's got a special blanket today. Perfect. Oh, I love that. Thank you. I'm going to read to you one of my favorite books. You know, I used to be a kindergarten teacher. I used to teach kindergarten. You're in kindergarten, aren't you? Yeah. Are you in kindergarten yet? Yes, no? You're in kindergarten? Someday you'll be in kindergarten. Yeah. It's my favorite. Well, I used to read this book every year, and I miss doing that, so I'm bringing it to you. It's called Martin's Big Words. Do you know who this is? Martin Luther King. Okay. Thank you, Dakota. And let's look at the title page here. It was written by Doreen Rappaport and illustrated by Brian Collier. All right. Everywhere in Martin's hometown, he saw the signs, white only. His mother said these signs were in all southern cities and towns in the United States. Every time Martin read the words, he felt bad. Until he remembered what his mother told him. You are as good as anyone. In church, Martin sang hymns, he read from the Bible, he listened to his father preach. These words made him feel good. When I grow up, I'm going to get big words too. Martin grew up. He became a minister like his father, and he used the big words he had heard as a child from his parents and from the Bible. Everyone can be great. Right? That sounds like something that we hear here at the Unitarian Universalist Church, doesn't it? Yeah, everyone can be great. He studied the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi. He learned how the Indian nation won freedom without ever firing a gun. Martin said love when others said hate. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Have you heard those words before? No? Yes, yeah. It's important words. He said together when others said separate. He said peace when others said war. Sooner or later, all the people of the world will have to discover a way to live together. In 1955, on a cold December day in Montgomery, Alabama, Rosa Parks was coming home from work. A white man told her to get up from her seat on the bus so he could sit. She said no. And she was arrested. Montgomery's black citizens learned of her arrest. It made them angry. They decided not to ride the buses until they could sit anywhere they wanted. Yeah, that was an important day. For 381 days, they walked to work and school and church. They walked in rain and cold and in blistering heat. Martin walked with them and talked with them and sang with them and prayed with them until the white city leaders had to agree that they could sit anywhere they wanted. That seems like such a basic thing, doesn't it? Getting on a bus, being able to sit where you want? Yes. When the history books are written, someone will say, there lived black people who had the courage to stand up for their rights. In the next 10 years, Black Americans all over the South protested for equal rights. Martin walked with them and talked with them and sang with them and prayed with them. White ministers told them to stop. Mayors and governors and police chiefs and judges ordered them to stop. But they kept on marching. Wait, for years I have heard the word wait. We have waited more than 340 years for our rights. They were jailed and beaten and murdered, but they kept on marching. Some Black Americans wanted to fight back with their fists. Martin convinced them not to by reminding them of the power of love. Love is the key to the problems of the world. Many white Southerners hated and feared Martin's words. A few threatened to kill him and his family. His house was bombed. His brother's house was bombed, but he refused to stop. Remember, if I am stopped, this movement will not be stopped, because God is with this movement. The marches continued. More and more Americans listened to Martin's words. He shared his dreams and filled them with hope. I have a dream that one day in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. After 10 years of protests, the lawmakers in Washington voted to end segregation. The white-only signs in the South came down. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. cared about all Americans. He cared about people all over the world, and people all over the world admired him. In 1964, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. He won it because he taught others to fight with words, not fists. Martin went wherever people needed help. In April 1968, he went to Memphis, Tennessee. He went to help garbage collectors who were on strike. He walked with them and talked with them and sang with them and prayed with them. On his second day there, sadly, he was shot and he died. That's very sad, isn't it? But his big words are still alive for us today. What do you think his big words are? Love. Peace. That's right. Freedom. Together. And I have a dream. The end. What words are you going to take with you today when you go out to play and learn? What do you think? You will take peace? Oh, so happy to hear that. And you're going to take love? Oh, that's fantastic. What do you think, Dakota? I have a dream. I like that. I like it. Sage, anything? Together. You like my dress? Oh, thank you so much. Callie Presley, do you have a big word to take with you today? What big word? What do you think, Presley? Peace. It's okay. You know what, Callie? It's okay to think about it. Yeah, you think about it. All right. Well, with that, I will. Yes, you can put a stone in the water. And then you can go on out to learn and to play. She can do it, Dad. Put on the stone? Yeah, come on. Yeah, what colors do you like? Oh, just the blue one. Thank you all. Jen, would you please light the healing candle for us today? Thank you. Spirit of life and love, as we light this candle today, not knowing what may need to be healed tomorrow and the days ahead, we call upon you to be with us and keep us strong as we commit ourselves to the shared values of our faith and endeavor to keep them alive, flowing and flourishing in this world despite the chaos that persists around us. We are especially aware that tomorrow is the beginning of a new chapter, and it will not be an easy chapter to write. But we must remember that communities like ours are resistance to hate. We have one another, and together we are a force for love and for justice. Let us be grateful that finally, after too much loss and too much destruction, a ceasefire deal in Gaza has taken effect. Let us recognize that our collective voices that call for mercy and justice can make change. Let them be ever persistent. Spirit of life and love, while we are together here today, let us offer healing to one another so that we may do together what we cannot do alone. Amen. Author Terry Pratchett says, "There's always a story. It's all stories, really. The sun coming up every day is a story. Everything's got a story in it. Change the story, change the world." Our ritual of the sharing of joys, concerns, and sorrows embodies the belief that there is power in weaving our stories together, binding our strings of love and hope and joy and making them stronger. In our Joys and Sorrows book, you are able to write any significant joy or sorrow occurring in your life that you would like for me to speak out loud. And today, from Dorothy, she has a joy. She's so proud of our participation in the MLK parade. Those we encountered loved UUCL. There was lots of waving. There were even TV cameras and a sense of connection with each other and with the Interfaith Coalition. Thank you, Dorothy. And I know Dorothy posted pictures on Facebook so that you can see. Super grateful that my UU family shows up. The MLK Junior Parade was a blast. Also, go Buckeyes tomorrow. So you are invited now to come forward for our ritual of joys and sorrows. You may take whichever stone or stones feels right to you and drop it in the bowl, connecting to others, feeling the power of being together in this community. Jen, can you please put stones in for those joining on our streaming services today? Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for playing today. That was beautiful and very moving. Here we gather, tucked back in this friendly neighborhood between the beautiful tall pines. We are a community of people who have arrived from many different paths, yet we seek a common goal: to bring more love to a hurting but beautiful world. As Unitarian Universalists, we aspire to reach this goal through our shared values, one of which is the value of generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. This we can only do together, and your monetary gifts are essential to supporting our endeavor. So our ushers will now pass the plate to take up our collection. Yes.
This is a shared plate.
Oh, I had that in there.
So, in honor of Catherine Steele, who's coming in, there she is at the back, to support our lead our hospitality team, and of course in honor of Maggie Colson, who's done such a good job this past year. I'm going to read these words from Catherine. Do you enjoy the yummy snacks and treats during social hour after Sunday services? Do you enjoy coffee and tea to help lift your spirits? The Hospitality Committee is always happy to have volunteers to set up and break down. And we're always accepting donations to help fund and provide these special things each week. This upcoming Sunday, today, is the opportunity to donate. We're doing our Share the Plate offering to be shared with the Hospitality Committee to help support their work. Thank you very much for your generosity.
Thank you. Everything has a story in it. Indeed, our lives are comprised of an infinite amount of stories all woven together in the tapestry of life. No story exists on its own. Separation is an illusion. Each story, the small, seemingly unimportant ones, to the stories told around the world, are each a thread woven into a grandiose picture that becomes more intense as the world keeps spinning through space and time. Theologically speaking, then, all of the stories of all of us together continuously shape the world, and they shape our common destiny. And so it matters. The stories we tell, and the stories we live, and the stories we influence all matter to how this tapestry ultimately takes shape. It's important that as we reach back into history, we grab the threads of love, pulling them forward, intertwining them with our own as we weave into the future. This is why we remember that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., why we remember the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., because he is a source of wisdom, a prophetic person whose words and deeds challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. The story of Unitarian Universalism has been written in part because of Dr. Martin Luther King and the legacy he left behind, because of the threads of love, which were many, that we are able to pull forward and intertwine with our own. The 6 shared values of Unitarian Universalism, centered in love, are connected to the threads of Martin Luther King Jr. Interdependence, pluralism, equity, justice, generosity, and transformation. Those are our shared values. And it is my hope that you find the connections between our story and his story today throughout our time of worship together. In 1966, at the Unitarian Universalist Association's General Assembly, Martin Luther King Jr. was invited to deliver a speech to the attending UUs for what we call the Ware Lecture. The 1966 Ware Lecture happened to take place in Hollywood, Florida. MLK's lecture was entitled, "Don't Sleep Through the Revolution." I'm sure you've heard those words before. And it is available to read in its entirety online at the UUA's website. In fact, I posted it in our Facebook group for your convenience, and I will send it to the newsletter as well. We might consider making it a yearly ritual to read MLK's Ware Lecture, to center ourselves in his words as we celebrate him, as we go out into the community to march in the parade that honors him and our local Black community. We should read this Ware Lecture each year, understanding MLK's charge to us, giving a deeper meaning to what it is we are celebrating, so that the story we write is one of love and significance, and it is lived through intention. We should read it so that we are sure to stay awake enough to the movements of change around us and to reflect on how to weave his vision into the story we are writing as a religious people. As MLK said in this Ware Lecture to a large crowd of Unitarian Universalists, certainly the church has a great responsibility because when the church is true to its nature, it stands as a moral guardian of the community and of society. It has always been the role of the church to broaden horizons, to challenge the status quo, and to question and break mores if necessary. I'm sure that we all agree that the church has a major role to play in this period of social change. MLK's big words have resonated with us for the past 60 years, but in order for us to truly work his vision into our stories, we must expand our knowledge of what he said beyond the palatable, more agreeable, "I have a dream" statements and take a closer look at some of his more radical views. For example, let us not forget, let us not bury in the archives these words from MLK. Whites, it must frankly be said, are not putting in a similar mass effort to re-educate themselves out of their racial ignorance. It is an aspect of their sense of superiority that the white people of America believe they have so little to learn. The reality of substantial investment to assist Negroes into the 20th century, adjusting to Negro neighbors and genuine school integration is still a nightmare for all too many white Americans. These are the deepest causes for contemporary abrasions between the races. Loose and easy language about equality, resonant resolutions about brotherhood fall pleasantly on the ear, but for the Negro, there is a credibility gap he cannot overlook. He remembers that with each modest advance, the white population promptly raises the argument that the Negro has come far enough. Each step forward accents an ever-present tendency to backlash. That was from his 1967 speech called "Where Do We Go From Here?" And we need the wisdom of those big words to help us shape our stories. And may those stories be stories of humility, of curiosity, and the willingness to adjust our stubborn worldviews. So let us sing together, sing that into existence with hymn number 1018, "Come and Go With Me." This is in your teal hymnal. Do we have the teal hymnals? Yes. 1018.
And I'll call out the changing words for you.
And as I mentioned earlier, holding that hymnal is like holding a piece of history. And at the bottom of, the page, you can read who composed the song, and you can go and research it to understand the historical context about it, so you understand what we're singing. Thank you. Well, I am honored once again to have Nikki here in the pulpit today. This is fantastic. I love it. So with that, Nikki.
Good morning, everyone. Today I'd like to share a quote from MLK's letter from a Birmingham jail. We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. In prior weeks, we discussed civil resistance and what that looks like, starting with finding our voice and supporting the voices of the oppressed, and engaging in radical listening and building community. We took a hard look at the obstacles we face and how to utilize cognitive dissonance rather than shy away from it, so that we may build greater empathy and understanding for our fellow humans. Today, as we approach Martin Luther King Day, I would like to honor his legacy, his memory, and his words. His fight for justice and equality has a message that has been strong enough to empower generation after generation. But there have been some who have found this message too strong and have sought to dilute this message to make it more palatable to their own interests. I've seen this happen with the gospel too. As many of you know, I grew up in an evangelical Pentecostal Church of God tradition, and now I identify as pagan. That's a big jump there. But like everyone's story in here, it's not so cut and dry. In my practice that focuses on connection to spirit and the earth and other people, I kept finding Jesus on that path again and again, and I loved him more and more. And it may seem odd for a self-professing pagan to quote the Bible and claim to love Jesus, but believe it or not, I went to Bible college during my undergrad, and then an evangelical university during my master's program. And I grew up in a very strict, high-control religious system that maybe was a little more extreme than just a regular church, and that ironically boasted virtues of things like freedom in Christ and the power of the Holy Spirit, while simultaneously stressing that this freedom did not include questioning religious leaders or doctrine, and reminding us that our power relied on obedience to authority. My need to heal from religious trauma led me to separating from the evangelical church, and I set out on a journey of religious deconstruction. The Jesus I kept running into on my deconstruction journey wasn't the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus that was pictured in my churches, where racism, sexism, and classism prevailed. It was the Jesus I had read about alone in my room, the Jesus that fed hungry people without asking if they were on drugs, who healed people without asking about their sexual history, and dared anyone to cast the first stone. This Jesus called us to love the outsider, to give up everything to the poor. This Jesus flipped tables and drove the greedy swindlers out of the temple. This Jesus was not polite, quiet, not a meek, mild man who held a baby lamb all the time and followed every rule. He spoke in parables so that he had time to get away while the meaning of his message actually set in, because these messages often were disruptive to people in power. A professor of mine at one of my Christian universities made a point that stayed with me for a long time, though I'm not sure that it's a point that he intended to make. He asked us, "Why did Jesus die?" And we all raised our hands with our responses that we had learned in Sunday school since we were toddlers. Jesus died to save us from our sins, or Jesus died so that we could go to heaven, or Jesus died because it was God's will. And my professor looked at us blankly for a moment, and was searching our face for any understanding, and finding none, he said, no, no. Jesus died because he literally said and did things that got him killed. That's it. And you could see in that moment our narrow worldviews just starting to crumble on our faces. And so he went on to explain, like, Jesus was seen as radical, as revolutionary, and this message was perceived as a threat to those in power. He questioned the why of religious rules and laws at the time that were oppressive and used to maintain hierarchy. This message of giving to the poor, of caring for widows and orphans, of not using religion as a status symbol, and the idea that salvation was for everyone was a radical notion. How diluted has this message become in modern Christianity today? And in a similar light, how have the words of Dr. King been diluted by the white moderate voices who are seeking to keep the peace and not stir the pot? Dr. King was nonviolent, he was kind, he was diplomatic. He brought a message of unity, equality, peace, and hope for the future. But what some people gloss over are his words about how to achieve that unity and equality and how to disrupt unjust systems.
And so with that, I would like to enter a time of reflection and contemplation. Nikki and Isaiah and I are going to read some of those hard, radical quotes from MLK. Because achieving unity, equality, and peace is no easy task. But it is the necessary work before us if we are to free all of us from the systems that divide us, take away our rights, violate us, starve us, and unfortunately, those systems that call too many people to the side of hate. So as we read the words that have been deemed a little bit more controversial, I want you to reflect on them and imagine what it would actually look like to story these words into existence. What will it take from us? What can we do? How can we make them come alive? I will start, first of all, by putting this quote I'm going to read into some context. And I found this on actually the Ben & Jerry's website. I'm always happy to promote Ben & Jerry's ice cream. They say, when protesters took to the streets after the murder of George Floyd, some commentators immediately labeled the largely peaceful demonstrations riots. But riot is a loaded term, and it's most often been used by white people to demonize people of color demanding change. Next time you hear someone describing a protest as a riot, be sure to notice who's speaking and ask yourself who benefits from and who's harmed by the use of that racist term. And so this is MLK's quote from 1968 in his speech called "The Other America." A riot is the language of the unheard. And what is it America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the promises of freedom and justice have not been met. And it has failed to hear that large segments of white society are more concerned about tranquility and the status quo than about justice and humanity. Just take a moment in between the quotes that we're reading to breathe. Close your eyes if you want to, reflect, and imagine.
Always anchor our external direct action with the power of economic withdrawal.
We must see now that the evils of racism, economic exploitation, and militarism are all tied together. And you can't get rid of one without getting rid of the other.
There is nothing new about poverty. What is new, however, is that we now have the resources to get rid of it. Why should there be hunger and privation in any land, in any city, at any table, when man has the resources and the scientific know-how to provide all mankind with the basic necessities of life? There is no deficit in human resources. The deficit is in human will. The time has come for an all-out world war against poverty.
In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends.
White Americans must recognize that justice for Black people cannot be achieved without radical changes in the structure of our society.
Again, we have deluded ourselves into believing the myth that capitalism grew and prospered out of the Protestant ethic of hard work and sacrifices. Capitalism was built on the exploitation of Black slaves and continues to thrive on the exploitation of the poor, both Black and white, both here and abroad.
I must make two honest confessions to you, my Christian and Jewish brothers. First, I must confess that over the past few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in this stride toward freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with you on your methods of direct actions, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection.
Those are some hard words, and those are words that still call us to stay in the fight for justice and to do the hard work. So we're going to take a moment to enter into a meditative hymn. It's number 34 in your gray hymnal. Now, this is a hymn that is very often sung as a solo, and I think Tim is going to sing it today. But okay, he thinks so. But as we are often here for each other, I invite all of you to enter the hymn as you are called to do so. You may sing it, you may hum it, you may contemplate the words. Today won't be a performance, although I am very pleased that Tim will be blessing us with his voice. But we will do it together, so thank you. Go ahead. We have some brave folks in here.
The quotes from MLK that we listen to are considered a point of contention when they should be seen as a generous roadmap for how to make things right. His words should not be seen as divisive or as a threat to democracy because they're literally the opposite. There is a divisive message that has been spreading for years, this us versus them mentality between religions, races, political parties. There are a select few who benefit greatly off of our division. One of those people is a member of my family. Tomorrow, my cousin will be inaugurated as Vice President of the United States. The aunt and uncle that I talked about the last time I spoke, who took me in, that's his father. So my entire family will be in attendance at the inauguration, likely wearing red hats. I will not be watching. I will be marching in the MLK parade in Bartow instead. Celebrating unity rather than division. My family earnestly believes that their policies are divinely given, and in their minds they're doing the right thing, right for them anyway, all while my cousin's ideology is harmful to people of color, to all women, and the planet. And I feel anger and grief, and I wish every day that things were different. But in spite of everything, I still believe in the power of change. When I came out to my aunt, and I shared that story with you, that's actually JD's stepmom, I was expecting to be disowned. I had listened time and time again about how gay people were going to hell, and there were people who needed a place to stay who were going to stay with our family, and they were sent away because they were queer. Meanwhile, the family didn't know they had a queer under their roof for 4 years. Surprise. But when I finally told her, and I asked her if I was going to hell, she said no. Like, excuse me, what? Like 36 years of hearing something different, it's kind of wild. But she said she knew that I had a good heart and she didn't believe that I was going to hell. And this was a huge difference from anything that I had heard from her ever. Her worldview was different now because now she had a queer family member. There's still a lot of work for us to do on our relationship, obviously. Our relationship is complicated. Also, not everyone can expect this outcome from this kind of situation because every situation is different. But the point is, people's worldviews can be informed through their relationships, and change is possible. So tomorrow, I won't be watching my family take part in an unjust system that I feel is using them to harm and oppress others. Instead, I will be building friendships here and doing what I can for my community. Like my aunt who could change her mind about where my soul should end up, or like me who can deconstruct an entire religious worldview and start over, we can sit with discomfort. We can wrestle with what we've been taught. And we can do things to build a better world, even when we're afraid. While my time in Bible college left me with more questions than answers, the scriptures, both historical and allegorical, still hold a place in my heart. One story that stands out to me now is the story of the Tower of Babel. In Genesis, it says, "But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. And the Lord said, indeed, the people are one, and they all have one language. And this is what they begin to do. Now nothing that they propose to do will be withheld from them. Come, let us go down and therefore confuse their language that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad and from there over the face of all the earth, and they ceased building the city. Whether you believe this really happened or it was just a myth, the point of the story is this. The people were all united and speaking the same language, and they built a tower that reached heaven. God recognized that the people were becoming too powerful and did not want them to band together in their wickedness. God took the power from his people by scattering their languages so that no one could understand one another. I don't take this as a warning that we shouldn't band together. In fact, I see it as the complete opposite. That we should never let an administration or hierarchical system or ideology take the place of a God. When an administration, whether it's Republican, Democratic, third party, seeks to pit us against one another, to confuse our language and keep us from understanding each other, it is because it is already afraid of our power. A government will never be my God, and I refuse to let it separate me from my fellow humans. MLK said that people fail to get along because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other, and they don't know each other because they have not communicated with each other. Let us listen to the entire story and sit with the language that makes us uncomfortable. Let us communicate and build relationships and put in the work to maintain them. Let us deconstruct the oppressive systems that have been built so that the truth may find us there with nothing in our way.
I offer you these closing words, which are once again taken from MLK's speech at the Ware Lecture. All I'm saying is this, that all life is interrelated, and somehow we are all tied together. For some strange reason, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of all reality. to face the reality that we are all interrelated is to recognize the power of our beingness. Knowing that we are joined by our shared values and that we are here to support each other gives us the power to raise our voices for more hope, more love, and more joy. And so we will sing this into being now with our closing song, which is in your gray hymnal, number 368.
Now let us sing, 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 sing. Now let us sing, 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 sing. Lift up your voice, be not afraid. Now let us sing to the power of the faith within. Now let us sing, sing, sing. Now let us sing, sing, sing. Lift up your voice, be not afraid. Now let us sing to the power of the faith within. Oh, let us sing, 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 sing. Now let us
Crystal, would you please extinguish our chalice? And would you all join me in our chalice extinguishing words? We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of love, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world.